I thought I'd give a little bit of history to start with on the Wagyu, about how they got into the U.S. and a little bit about the association, and then go back and tell you about our breeding programs. There were 4 bulls brought into the U.S. in 1975, 2 red and 2 black. Not sure whether they were legal or not legal, but there were no cows. And they were brought in at the same time that the Charolais and the Limousin and the Continental cattle come in to give us more muscle and more height in our cattle. And it was a time when the medical profession told us we should eat leaner beef. We didn't want fat. And so these Wagyu, the 4 that came in, were just kind of lost. In fact, they were sold in a bankruptcy situation out of Colorado State. And then they were here, and still the genetics are still there. There's some of them in our purebred cattle today. 1993, World K brought in 2 bulls and 3 cows. That was the first of the new genetics coming out of Japan. And it's kind of an interesting story. Basically, the state of Washington has a marketing program to try and develop agricultural products to sell in the Pacific Rim. And they knew that the quotas were going to come off of beef going into Japan in 1991. And so they sent 3 of us to Japan from the university to look at the market and see what we thought. One guy was a rural sociologist that understood the Japanese culture, and 2 of us were animal scientists that understood the cattle. And I was pretty ignorant about, I thought the USDA choice meat was probably the best in the world. But when I saw this meat in Japan, I'd never seen anything like it before. It was highly marbled. They ate it different. It was unbelievable beef. So we came back to the university and suggested that they bring in some more of these genetics from Japan. And okay, sorry, Butch, I appreciate it. You're in the front row. You never were when you were students. You were more in the back. You might have a good influence on him, Cotton. So we were lucky. The Speaker of the House in Washington, D.C. was an individual by the name of Tom Foley, and he had been an ambassador to Japan. And we came back with this recommendation that we needed to import some of these cattle in here for breeding purposes to make this program work. Well, he got it done. I don't know how it was done, if he threatened Toyota or what, but we were the only place in the world, the United States, the only place that got the permits to bring these cattle in. So over time, there were primarily 4 importers that brought in about 30 bulls and 200 cows. And over about a 6-year period. Next slide, please. Now, you must have skipped some slides there. Okay. Well, that's, anyway, no, you got to back up some more. One, there we go, okay. So that was the cattle that came in. They got foot and mouth disease, and so we couldn't bring any more cattle in. And now the Japan has got regulations. I doubt if we can get any good cattle in from them. I go back, I'm sorry about this, history of the Wagyu Association started in 1990. It was started by Don Lively and Fred Hildebrand, and they're the ones that ended up with those 4 bulls. This is before the new genetics came in. And so basically, we weren't sure we were going to get any other genetics in, and I went for the university, went down there to buy a bull. We were going to try to buy an animal, and I learned how to learned my lesson in dealing with Texans. Don Don was quite a businessman, and so we'd made an agreement. We'd buy this bull for $16,000. I had to talk to the university into spending $16,000 on a bull. So I went down there to get the bull, and Don said, well, the deal's changed. You got to buy $50,000 worth of genetics. I said, what do you mean that the bull was 16? He said, yeah, the bull's still 16, but you got to buy the additional cattle to make a $50,000 deal. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, I got to go back to my university and try to talk them into another $40-some thousand. You know, that's ridiculous. He said, well, that's what it is. So I went back to the university, and somehow I got them talked into. So we bought $50,000 worth of, we bought some more cows. We even ended up with some steers. But the bull's name was Alvin, and I'll bring Alvin up every once in a while as we go along. 1990 to 95, Jim Scott was the executive director of the Wagyu Association. He was out of Kansas, and actually he ended up being partners in Japanese venture partners, which bought part of the cows in. There's some interesting stories there. 95 to 98, Trey Kirkpatrick was out of Texas, executive director. The Wagyu Association was not doing well. There wasn't enough interest in it. We weren't able to keep paying people. And 2000, the financial office moved to Bend, Oregon. Been all over the United States. R.L. Freeborn, which is a individual that did a lot for the Wagyu Association, kind of a controversial individual. He officed and paid for the Wagyu Association. Charlie Gaskins, who's here today, and Janine Diavola at the university did all the registrations. And so basically, next slide. The financials moved to Washington State University, and we could do it basically free, no charge to the association. Charlie worked for nothing. Janine, I think she got a small salary and kept the registrations going for us. 2010 to 2015, the Wagyu Association started doing better. And so we hired, the thoughts were we would go in with the Australians. This sounds like a strange situation. In 2015, we hired Michael Beatty, who had been the executive director at the Australian Association, to come in. And we hired Martha Patterson, who's here today, took over the registrations, and the office moved to Post Falls. It's the University of Idaho office up there. There's a lot of controversy over that. But anyway, that's what we ended up with. But we were using Breed Plan. We used Breed Plan and ILR2 for 5 years. And we had Charlie Gaskins through the university had approximately 3,000 points of carcass data on Wagyu F1s that we had dedicated the university herd to. We had over 103 bulls that we had evaluated. And so we tried to put them into the Australian Association. And they didn't accept them because we didn't have birth weights, 200-day, 400-day, 600-day weights. That was the excuse. And Charlie, I don't know how many times he tried to put it in, but 3 different times. My thoughts are the reason was we had more carcass data than the Australians did. So that would have thrown the balance in the Americans' court having more bulls that were evaluated than the other situation. So I've been with the Australians, and there's a lot of controversy right now that a lot of our breeders want to go that way and be in the Australian Association. I've been there, I've done that, and I'm against it. I have good friends, and I do business with the Australians, and I'm a member of the Australian Association. I have animals in that association. But I do not believe we should abandon this association and go that direction. It's a mistake, and I'll tell you why. The Australians have 48% of the Wagyu meat coming into the United States right now. Why is that? How did that happen? They had the China market, and it was a great market until COVID hit. You talked to Al Brown was telling me, I don't know where Al's at, he's in here somewhere, or somebody was telling me that they had been to China, one of the guys, it wasn't Al, it was somebody else, they'd been to China before COVID. all the restaurants were serving Australian Wagyu. They had that market. They had the Pacific Rim market. COVID hit, all those shut down. So now they're pushing their meat to America. We are the strong market. And basically, been a long time since I've had to lecture. And so people say, well, they can't send meat in here as cheap as we can make it. They can't do that. Well, I was hired in 1970 by the university as a sheep, beef cattle reproductive physiologist. And I saw the New Zealanders and the Australians send sheep in here and ruin the sheep market. They took it. And people said, well, how could they do that? They can't make it cheaper. It didn't make any difference. They either had to bury it there or they sold it here as a loss. So they're for real. And they will send meat over here cheaper than we can produce, even if they're losing money, because they got no other choice. So we either got to get better and we got to get ready. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. You're not going to be able to stop it any other way but to be better at what we're doing. The reason the Australians have the upper hand right now is they got the EBVs quicker than we got the EPDs. And a lot of our breeders have gone that way. You can't blame them. And you can't blame the Australians because they got the product and we have the market. And so basically, I think there's big changes happen in any product, but we've got one coming in this one, and it's not going to be an easy ride. I don't know what this Angus cow's doing on here. Come on. Yeah. They're trying to get me back? Okay. Well, anyway, basically, I'll talk a little bit more about the association. Then we had George Owens came in. Next slide, please. And then Robert, one of the things that the association's had trouble with, every time we change executive director, and welcome, Jerry. We're glad to have you in here. Every time we've changed executive director, they've wanted to work with another program for doing the EPDs. And this has had problems because we had hard to get them off the ground. Now, every system we work with is good and reliable and all. It just takes them a while. We're working with the University of Georgia now. I hope we stay there and keep getting these EPDs because we need it. We need people. We need the association to get programs together, contract herds, do EPDs on bulls that individuals own that can't do it themselves. A lot of people can't. It can't. And we need the F1 producers. We need them. They were here. They made the business work. What happened? All this when we started, the market was Japan. That's where we were shipping the meat. All the guys that were producing Wagyu was not staying here. The market wasn't here. It was shipped to Japan, Pacific Rim. 2003, the best thing that ever happened to the Wagyu breed was mad cow disease. People don't even realize that. It happened right here in Washington. All the meat we were producing that AgriBeef or Snake River Farms, Masami Foods, Co-Beef America, Imperial, all of it was going to Japan. So nobody heard of it. But when mad cow disease, that really caused a problem. We had meat stuck on the ports in Tokyo, no place to go. They wouldn't accept it. What do? You ship it back to America? Had beef already piled up in Oakland, Seattle, San Francisco, all up and down the coast. No place to go. That wasn't bad enough. These guys all had 400 days worth of cattle in the feedlot behind it. Had to feed them for 400 days. So you had the feedlots were full of cattle that were going to go to Japan. They'd contracted producers to make the calves clear out a year and a half out. And I was one of the guys that contracted the calves. And I was lucky I had a partner that was a banker. He was a banker at Pacific of, you know him, Scott, Jerry Pittenger. And we had contracted 2,000 calves at 10 cents over market price. and nobody wanted them. Well, I couldn't even sell the wife and kids and make enough money to do that. So two of the companies, AgriBeef and Masami, backed us and bought the calves. But we were in a tight spot. And best I explain, if we didn't honor these contracts, then we'd never get those contractors back again. They'd never run calves for us. They'd never speak to you again. It's the way cattlemen are. So basically, all these guys were selling this meat back into the U.S. at 60 cents on the dollar. They were losing money. Masami didn't even know how to make hamburger. All they knew how to was make Japanese cuts. My son went down there, took in a grinder, and they were just throwing these Japanese cuts in the grinder and making hamburger and trying to give it away because nobody knew what Wagyu was. That changed the whole market. The market changed from being an export market into the U.S. And about the restaurant people said, hey, this is better than certified Angus. Sorry, Jerry. And they started buying it. And that started the Wagyu program you're seeing today, where we have the best market in the world right here in the United States. And it's amazing what you think. I told my wife, I said, when mad cow disease, I saw that, I said, man, that ruined us. I mean, we're done. But it was the best thing that ever happened. So sometimes when you think something's bad and it's going to hurt you, it turns around. And that may be the same thing with the Australians. It may kick us in the ass, and we may start doing more progeny tests, and we may start getting things done. And I hope so, because that's the future. Now let me get back and started on our program. What we did, we registered our first calf in 1990. And I saw it, I believed it. I believe the Wagyu have something to offer to the cattle industry. Now, I've been 30-some years trying to get the respect of the cattle industry for raising Wagyu, and I'm sure some of you felt the same thing. The old-timers, they don't have any butt in these cattle. And the reason, we were all trained as kids, you look at the rear end of a cow and follow it up through, because if there's muscle in the rear end, it's going to carry through to the loin. It's a good concept. Wagyu doesn't follow that. I mean, they have no butt, a little weak in the back. They have good loin eye. The Japanese selected that. They do have good loin eye. So we started with a polled bull, and it shows you how wrong you can be. There were 2 blacks, 2 reds. The Japanese told me the blacks are the best marbling, so those are the ones you want to stick with. The little ones are Tajima. You hear that term. They're the best marbling. So the smallest of these black bulls is a bull named Fuji. And basically, we love, we went to Don, and I bought a son of Fuji. And just because on the name, that's the deal. Don had already named this bull, and his name was Alvin. We were stuck with that. So you can see he was a 331st bull or animal registered. They had quite a few. And that's we bred our Angus Simmental cows that way. I probably set the Wagyu breed back several years by using Alvin, because we gave the semen away to every producer I could find. We collected the semen. We just gave it to them, just breed with it. We were trying to get it going. When the new genetics came in, we started using Michifuku and Aruki. Some of the mistakes that were made, actually we started blood typing these cattle before DNA was in here. And then we do DNA now, and that was a real good program. But the percentage cows, a lot of people didn't DNA. So when you got a polled purebred cow, the Australians won't accept it anymore unless it was DNA'd all the way up from the F1. A mistake we made. But we kept using full-blood sires on our purebred cows. Next slide, please. This is a registration paper. It shows 1991 of our first calves. And there's a young lady here today, Teresa Rand, who bought one of these from us, and that cow lived to be 25 years old. Next slide. And this is a slide I had found in my books, and it shows we weren't doing DNA. We were doing blood typing to match these cows up at that time. Next slide. So we ended up going into 97, 98, going into the full blood business. Being a university professor, I didn't have the money that it took to buy these blasted cows. But anyway, we got a heifer as 068 heifer and 3 Kikiashu 400 heifers, and that started our full blood cow herd. So our cow herd, people ask me out here about milk, and I'm saying, yeah, I don't worry too much about it. And they said, well, they don't milk well. I said, okay, I give you that. There's no doubt. But as the way we run our cows, and I'll show you, we unassisted calving. We're calving right now, I think. Our cows are out. They're calving. So we round them up. And we put a tag on the calf, mother them up, and figure out who's who. And the cow's got to raise the calf herself. Since Arlie and her sisters left, there's no more bottle calves. I mean, this old man just doesn't have time for that. I mean, and I'll show you the country. I can't chase them down anyway. So 85% of the cattle we sell are raised by their biological mother. You'll see some ET calves. We do some embryo transfer, but we're proud that these cows can raise their own calves. And if they can't, they get one time, and the second time they end up in Hamburger or Lewiston Livestock. So we have a spring and fall calving season. We don't cull any cows for genetic defects. And notice, you'll see anything we sell, you'll see like an F11, a carrier. That means it's got a defect. We don't cull any for that, but we don't use any bulls that are carriers. All our bulls are free. So we got a 50-50 chance of that calf being free or if it's carrier. So we have some that still have defects. We don't just go in and cull a whole herd because we think some of these cows have some really good genetics. Go on to the next one. So this is the country we run our cows in. This is where they calve. This is on the breaks of the river. It's on the south side looking toward the Snake River. And it's big country. We own the land that you see there. There's no way this old man can go out there, or even my workers can go out there and figure out if a cow needs help or not. If we see a cow that needs help, we'll help her, okay? But if she's not close to one of our roads or someplace we can get her in, it doesn't work. Let's go to the next slide. This is running those cows. You can see it's pretty steep. It's steep country. Next slide. It's pretty country. We're looking across this time of the year. You can see those calves aren't tagged. And if they're over 2 or 3 days old, I don't care who you are, you're not going to catch them anyway. And next slide. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but these are cows. As you go across Lower Granite Dam, those rocks in there, those are Wagyu cows. We don't take a horse in there. Most people don't even like to walk in there. So it's tough country. And you can see this country is really good, and our university is named for the cougars. You go to the next slide. We lose calves to cougars. And you can see the paw on that guy is pretty big. And so I don't care if it's the cow's fault, my fault, or the cougar's fault. She's got to bring a calf in 2 years. And Al Brown has a bull he bought from me where the calf come in, and he's got claw marks on both sides and a bite mark in his back. So the association wants me to go out there and tag those calves and weigh them. And I got some cow that got a cougar off the top of that calf and saved it. And you expect me, of that calf balls, to be able to keep up with that cow? You got to be kidding me. I mean, and these cows are pretty, one of those calves' balls, it's not just the one cow that'll come. They'll all come after you, okay? So basically, this is a government trapper. I got a good situation. Randy Bunce, a neighbor, lives in the middle of me down there. And we lease his land, and he raises sheep. He has, 15 head of sheep that he sells to the Muslims. And it's like having canary cage in the coal mine because the cougars like the sheep better than they do my calves. So when he starts missing sheep, then I start, okay, we got to get ready because he's going to come after calves later. But we average a cat a year probably. Maybe 1 out of 3 years are legal, but the rest of the time, go ahead. They're hard to get, really. You got to get the guy with a good dog to get them. We try, and they're really hard to get. So sire selection on the bull side, I talked about the cow side. We think the cow side is just as important, and we think our cows are raised right. They got a tough environment. We started with Alvin, and Alvin historically has been the poorest marbling bull. And when we had 103 bulls, he was third from the bottom, and he stayed there. We used the new genetics. WSU had EPDs in 1997, and basically we used those all up to 2017 to select bulls that we think are giving us the best offspring. We started in 2010 using residual feed intake, a feed efficiency, done in Yerington, Nevada by Lucy Snyder. They have a grow-safe system. Vitelli owns that now. And it's a way of figuring out whether your cattle are, how efficient they are. And we think this is important, really important. We went in 2019, we're using Agribee CPDs. We've been lucky enough to be able to incorporate some of our stuff with theirs, and they show us their EPDs. And now we're using the American Wagyu Association EPDs. And I'll explain that. Basically, we feel it's important to use the Wagyu Association EPDs. They're transparent to all of you. Agribeef will not let you see theirs. They let me, and then they'll let me show you, but you can't see anything else. So there's no way of you checking on me. But primarily, those are the ways we've selected our cattle over the years. Next slide, please. I better go a little bit further. I just want to show you some of the old data. I see people going back and using the old bulls. These were some of the first EPDs that came out from the new genetics and the old genetics. And this is marbling. 100 points there is 1/3 of USDA grade. And you can see that the Haruki 2s and Michifukus are higher marblers than the old genetics come in. You can see the ribeyes bigger. And their carcass weights are about the same. So N is the number of carcasses we looked at, 2015, 19.6. So basically, this led us in the right direction. A lot of people said the Wagyu Association never had EPDs. They've had them from the beginning. Just most people don't listen to them. They sell their cattle by pedigrees, and they say, well, we sold a heifer for $60,000, and this is a sister or a half-sister or something. You use all sorts of things for marketing. But these are what you need to watch, and they've been there. Go to the next slide. And I'm going to go a little bit through this on what I think people ought to do, and you can't do it by yourself, but this is how it goes. I'm going to talk about a contemporary group. That's a group of calves that are fed and done the same. They're calves that are the same age, come out of the same time cows. So most of ours, we recommend come out of heifers because they're easy calving. You can talk a producer into easy calving bull than you can breeding this whole herd because he wants to replace them with Angus. But they got to be born within a breeding season. They're fed together. They're harvested together. And this is an important thing. Many of us can't harvest a lot of calves together. If you've got a group of herd of 200 of these calves, you got to slaughter them all the same day. And so that means you got to depend on the big outfits to do it. And they can feed them, they slaughter them, they give you the data back. We also have what's called a linkage bull, a bull that's in each contemporary group that's already related back to the EPD program. Next slide, please. And I'm just going to give you some data. This is from one of my friends and Butch's friend. I'm not sure he's still a friend, Wally Ray. I think they went partners on a bull one time. Overflow data, that's where Wally lives. I went to visit him one time. Overflow is just a post office. I mean, a bunch of mailboxes. It's not even a town. But these are some bulls, and I'm just going to show the names. And the one that worry about most of you are familiar with is Michifuku. And his BMS score was 4.9. And these are other bulls that are in that. Now, go to the next slide, please. This is American data. And again, we got Michifuku in, and his BMS score is 6.9. Remember, that one was 4.9, okay? Now, next slide, please. So how you do this, to compare the cattle between Australia and America, I mean, these are herds way apart, and there's lots of environmental differences. We take Michifuku, in America he was 6.9, in Australia he was 4.9, and we make him 0. Okay, and the other bulls are either above him or below him. For example, Sanjuro, a bull we're familiar with, is 0.4 of a marbling grade above him. And over here, we have Nisho is 0.3, and we have Haruki is a -5. And so this is how EPDs are set up. This linkage bull in here, so we can say Sanjuro's the best bull, Nisho's the next, Mahashi's the next, and then these 3 bulls by Jiro, Takazakura, and Katsumi are all the same. And the poorest bull in this group is Haruki. Now that doesn't mean Haruki's the poorest bull. In some respects, he's better than the others. But this is how an EPD program is set up, basically. Now we have ways of genomically enhancing these data. They can look at the DNA, and then they can tell how much he marbles, because they look at 4,000 carcasses, all of the DNA, and they can see, okay, if it's shifted this way, this is the animal should be more marbling. He might grow more. The dairy industry has been using this for 10 or 15 years, and they're right on it. And we're just coming into it, but it's real important to us. Next slide. Okay, I already told you about a major event right there. Go to the next slide. How the industry's changed from an export industry to where we're at now. There's only 2 ways to increase profit as I see it, and I may be wrong on this, but one, you gotta somehow make your production cheaper. One, least cost rations, feed the cheapest feed you can, or more efficient cattle. The other way, you got to get more money for your product. The only 2 things you can do, okay? We've had a free ride here for quite a while. We've been getting good money for our product. I mean, easy, but it's not going to stay that way. It's going to get tougher. Next. These grow-safe systems, there's not a lot of them around, but they're quite interesting. The animal you can see can only put 1 head in. I mean, you can't get 2 animals in there eating. So they weigh under what the animal eats all the time. He's got electronic ear tag in him. It weighs that. It goes back to the office, and we keep him in there for 70 days, so you know exactly how much to weigh. Next slide, please. So you get average daily gain. You get the dry matter intake. I think the Angus Association selects more on dry matter intake. You get straight feed efficiency, which is feed in gain. Okay, it's simple to think. Okay, I could feed this animal 8 pounds, I gain 1 pound. We're never going to catch up with the chickens and the pigs and the fish, okay? But we can make ourselves better. But the problem was selecting on straight feed efficiency, which we understand, which is intuitive, is that size factors into that. And so larger animals sometimes end up more efficient unless they're in the winter, and then the smaller animals are more efficient. So you get fouled up by size. We have another term called residual feed intake, and this is the type of, next slide please, term that you're going to see more in the cattle industry, and the one that we're going to refer to. There's feed used for maintenance to keep our body warm, and there's feed used for growth. So in these trials, they can figure out, they know how much growth they do, they can calculate the maintenance feed, and then there's feed that's left over that's not used for either growth or maintenance. The scientists can't explain this to me quite right yet, but I think of it as feed that just goes right on through you, okay? It's just not utilized. So we're going to try to select against that. If we can select against that, and that's going to help us. So the economics, I'll just give you an example. You say, well, how important is that? I picked a bull, and he's not in this sale, so you can't figure him out. He was in a previous sale. He's got the same average daily gain. There's two bulls, A and B. Their body weights are about the same, 865, 873. Their marbling was very close, but their feed efficiency is a minus 6.02 and a plus 2.4. And what that means is that bull A, the difference between them is 8 pounds. Bull B has to eat 8 pounds more feed a day to make the same gain, whether it's 2 pounds or 2.1 pounds. So you say, well, how can that be very important? And the feed, we'll just say feed costs you 17.5 a pound. So that's $1.43 on that animal a day. Costs you more. Next slide. Now, it doesn't translate directly to the calf, but it's a heritable trait, and we'll just say it's 45% heritable. That means that trait's going to be transferred to the calf at a rate of 45%. So that calf is going to take 3.672 pounds more feed a day at 17.5 cents, 64 cents a day. That calf's going to cost you more. And if you have him on feed for 400 days, that's $256. Well, yeah, it's starting to catch your attention now. And if you have 30 of those calves, that's $7,680. And if you keep that bull for 3 years, $23,400. Golly. So all of a sudden you say, what's more important, marbling or residual feed intake? I mean, we got to pay attention to that. We got to raise more efficient cattle any way we can. And so, next slide. Oh, I'll hold it. How much more can you pay for bull A than B? I really don't know. I don't think you can pay $23,000 more. I mean, I'd be tickled if you did. But what it's going to do, it's going to make your cow herd more efficient. And, you know, this is an important trait that we got to think about in the cattle industry. We got to get more efficient, and we got to pay attention to it. Next slide. Now, we hear all about EPDs and EBVs and who's best and what's wrong and all that. They're all going to lead you in the right direction, okay? Whether you're following the Australians, whether you're following agri-beef, whether you're following the Brazilians, whether you're following the Americans, all going in the right direction. And they're not perfect. And they keep changing. That's what's irritating sometimes. Sometimes you say, well, I got the best bull around. The next time they bring the data up, there's some other bull better and your bull's not as good. Well, that's just the way it's going to be. It's changing all the time. And it's not perfect. But it's the best estimate we got. We can't look at these cows. I looked at Alvin. I thought he was a good bull. He had big testicles and he was polled at that time. I thought that's a great bull. Poorest marbling bull in the whole deal. I thought Fuji is the best sire. You can't do that. You need data to follow. Now, also, you're going to see selection indexes. You're going to be one number. They take all the data and they give you one number, saying this is the best bull or the best cow. I'm not real impressed with that, okay? Let's go on one more. The Wagyu Association, American Wagyu Association, if I'm right, has approximately 7,000 carcasses to evaluate, and they make in their EPDs. I don't care about birth weights and stuff that much, but the breed plan, the Australians have 30,000 carcasses to make their data. So they think they're better than we are, and I'll give them that. They got more data. It's probably more reliable, a little more accurate. Agri-beef, sitting out here, Toppenish, has 100,000. Okay, they're not going to give it to us. They're not, you know, it's a priority. They worked long and hard to get their data. They know what's the bulls. They got 1,200 Wagyu bulls. 1,200. That's a lot of animals. Okay, so our association doesn't have an index yet. They will get one, I'm sure. I mean, industry is going to force them to do that. And the index are really good for when a commercial cattleman comes in here and wants to buy a bull, that John Harder comes in here and Kyle Harder want to buy a bull, a Wagyu bull. They got one number to look at. They can walk out there. Okay, that's simple. I don't have to think. But a breeder, the Wagyu breeder, needs to think and look and figure out what he's selection for. And so that's what I hope I can show you today. Is we'll take the next slide. This is AgriBeef's Wagyu index. And all these indexes, there's a company, what is it? Yeah, Abacus Bio out of England that charges $100,000 to figure out how to make an index for you. And they're good. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The Australians are using them. I believe most of the breed organizations are using them. And I'm just going to go through AgriBeef, and I think they're the greatest company around. But I can be critical of anybody. It's easy. They take in birth weight, weaning weight maternal, which is a milk, EPD, average daily gain, carcass weight, back fat, ribeye area, marbling, residual feed intake. They have RFI, which is really good. And they put all these together and they weight them. They put, okay, for marbling, we might put 256.78. I don't know where they get these numbers, but they're like that, okay? And then they come up with one number for you. And I'm saying, for a meat company, why in the world are they worried about milk? I don't know. I mean, their guys are there. I know there are guys that do that. I don't know why they do that, something like that. I don't worry about milk. I mean, my cow's either got to have a calf or not. If she can't milk, she won't raise a calf. And then I can figure that out. Digital Beef tells me she didn't raise a calf. So I select on several things. Marbling. We've got to have marbling in this breed. That's what got us where we're at. That's all we can do. We got to have carcass weight. My daughter complains when I send a small animal to make a carcass, and she says, "Oh, I'm not going to make any money on this thing." Well, I don't either. Okay? If the animal, even if it marbles, top marbling animal, and the carcass is 200 pounds lighter at $6 a pound, that's a lot of money, okay? So carcass weight's important. It's a growth factor. I don't care what they weigh at 200 days. It doesn't make any difference to me. Residual feed intake. That's the third thing I like. But it's not, our association doesn't have enough data for that. So they can't make an EPD. AgriBeef can. Vitelli makes an EPD, and I'm not sure quite how they do it, but it's on our program there. I'm using theirs when I can. And then ribeye area. That's our fourth. So we're only selecting on 3 or 4 things. You start selecting on 9, 12, 15 things, you're not going to get anywhere, in my opinion. You can't select for one either. You can't just select for marbling. You gotta have these other factors too. You gotta have some growth. And so as a breeder, you gotta be, just don't buy off on everything. Look at it, what your customer wants. A main customer for us is AgriBeef. They buy a lot of our bulls. We partner on certain things. We got to have those F1 producers. The full-blood producers complain about the F1 producers. They're selling meat too cheap. We're not. We got to get together. We need them for certain things. They've got data we can't get. They can get a lot of data in a hurry. And so basically, I think the association, there's room for everybody, but it's not going to be any easy ride anymore. It's going to get tougher. Next slide. We're using these EPDs that you see, and we may be the first. I don't know if we are or not, but this is what the association puts out, a histogram. This line through the middle means the animal's average. Intermuscular fat, marbling. So the further on the right side you are, probably the better, except for birth weight. I don't agree with this. It's not a linear trait. This means these calves are easier calving. They're smaller, okay? How small do we want them? In my country, I need them to get up and run, and I don't want a 45-pound calf. I need probably a 65-pound calf. Their hides are thin like horse hides, and we've had to move our breeding seasons and our calving seasons to go with what Mother Nature does. So this is a trait that I don't want them too big, and I don't want them too small. I want the EPD in the middle to be about where I want to stay. Now these other traits, what's happening here, and I can't figure it all out, but this is what I interpret. And Leon helped me on this. We have a red Wagyu group in here we bought red Wagyu, and they're not the same as black. They're two different breeds, okay? Akaushi and the Japanese black are two different breeds, but we got them together. And that's the way it started, and that's the way it'll probably all start. The red Wagyu will dominate this part, the growth part, okay? And they'll be real low when it comes to carcass traits. And so the black Wagyu are the opposite. They'll dominate the carcass traits, and they'll be low on growth. This just happens to be an example of a bull that we have. We call him F11. He just happened to be he's not an F11 carrier, but that's what we call him. And so he's he may be the only animal where every trait's above average. Is that what we're looking for? I don't know. I mean, it catches our attention. He's a more balanced bull. But I think these are easy to look at. If you want more milk, you look at milk and try to get a bull that's got more milk if you need it. If you've got lots of grass and your cows are out in your backyard, you bet I'd be pumping milk all I could. But mine aren't. So I don't worry about it. I mean, they got to survive. Next slide. I want to give a little credit to an Australian. I've been bad-mouthing them all day. And of course, this helps us too. This is Darren Hamlin. He just is a Strathdale Wagyu, and he's in with a company they call Pole Wagyu. It's 3 different good ranches. One is in Tasmania, the Hammonds. Strathdale is in Queensland, and he's with Mayura, Scott De Bruin. So they're real prominent Wagyu people. And he just won the Beef 2024 carcass contest with 732 entries. Not only do you have to be good to do that, you got to be just damn lucky. That's all there is to it. But Darren's a Pole Wagyu breeder, much like we are. We raise full bloods and we're proud of them, but we've been raising Pole for a long time. Again, been trying to get the respect of the Wagyu breed. If you're raising Pole Wagyu, you're raising a purebred that's not quite 100%. And my grandfather, we raised Herefords when I was a kid, and he told me, the polled Hereford, you take the horns off and you take the ass off. It's terrible what they did with that. And so the polled Hereford was always considered a second-grade Hereford cow. And basically, I've worried about that in trying to make the polled Wagyu and not make them a second grade. And so, anyway, Darren and I feel quite the same on that. He's a tremendous breeder, interesting individual. Next slide, please. So we're proud of this bull, G4. Scott's Pickard over there. If you need some semen collected, he's right there. He's collecting this bull. He collected him when he thought he was a dink. But this is the highest marbling bull in the U.S. today. And he's a polled, purebred bull. And he's higher marbling than all the other bulls, including the full-bloods. So we've kind of redeemed ourselves. We think, whether people accept it or not, we do believe the polled animal, the commercial cattleman, is going to want the polled animal more than he wants the horns. And I have people come in here and we'll buy today just on horns. Okay, we don't have many horned animals. Usually that's an accident. We never got them in, and when we did get them in, it was too late to dehorn them. So, last slide. This again shows the country running these cattle in. This happens to be on WSU's property, looking across the river at our property. Thank you very much. I hope we have a good day today. I would take any questions. Yeah, Brent. I don't know what the green line is, to tell you the truth, but I would like, I like a 65-pound calf at least. I mean, that's what I need. I mean, to survive, I think I need a calf that big. 45-pound calves. Incidentally, the small calf syndrome, that's the last defect come out, I think, and I may be wrong on this, but I think it's a 16% in our breed. And today, and we've never selected against it or for it. We select against bulls, but I think we got 4%. All our small calves have already died. We've lost them already. And so Mother Nature helped us on that situation. Okay. My daughter, women in your life are very important because they tell you what was wrong. Brent asked me what calf weight I would like. Yes.
You talked about Anger Beef's residual feed index.
Yes.
And you always put in your thing how many in the group. How many do they test that way? So they do bulls or just their heifers?
We're doing bulls every year, and we're doing heifers every other. AgriBeef has bought their own system. I believe they bought one for the University of Idaho. It was at Salmon, but I think they gave it to the university, and they have another one, and I don't know, but I believe they're doing all their young bulls. They have a herd up along the Canadian border of probably, and I don't know exactly, but I would guess 300 to 400 cows that they keep making their bulls out of, okay? And so I would guess they're doing 150 to 200 a year of their own. And then they can't make enough of their own bulls. They buy bulls from the rest of us. So, and I think anybody that's doing RFI data, they give you a preference because it's costly. It's not cheap. Well, I don't know where we're at on lunch yet, but it must be about time. Thank you.